By now, there's so much information out there. There are so many tips. There are so many other landscape photographers here on YouTube. And sometimes you may run into different information, different opinions, and different experiences from different photographers. In this week's video, we are diving deep into some of the biggest misunderstandings in landscape photography. So over time, certain rules may be ingrained in the landscape photography community, but the question is, are they actually true? So in this video, I'm going to bust 7 common myths that might be holding back your landscape photography. These rules are for the most part just best practices, and they may end up as exaggerated misunderstandings. We will explore everything from lens choices to tripod techniques, over editing and composition, and hopefully you'll walk away with a fresh perspective and confidence to break some of these so-called rules. Let's get started. So myth number 1. Back when I worked in a photography store, I was always standing there drooling over all this super expensive gear, all these professional lenses that could open up to f2.8. And I specifically remember a moment when Canon released their Canon EF 16-35mm f4. And the first thing I was thinking was like, why would anybody buy that lens over an f2.8 lens? And fast forward to when I left my job, who bought the f4 lens? Now, while fast apertures like f2.8 are fantastic for isolating subjects in portrait or creating shallow depth of fields, they aren't always the holy grail in landscape photography. So the suggestion that you will need an f2.8 lens for creating professional level landscape photography is indeed a myth. Now, I personally did come from the world of portrait photography where we needed that shallow depth of field. But in most landscape photos, you actually want that wider depth of field to keep everything in focus from front to back. Lenses with maximum apertures of f4 or even f5.6 are often ideal because they can be significantly lighter and more affordable while staying as sharp as their f2.8 counterparts, at least if you stop down a little bit. While the f2.8 lenses can be useful in low light situations or for specific creative effects, don't feel pressured to break the bank for one if your primary focus is landscapes. So this next one actually became a little bit of an Instagram meme a few years back, where professional photographers who did this actually got called out, which was a little bit hilarious. But the next myth is that you should never ever under any circumstances raise your tripod middle column. And the reason for this is you increase the risk of getting blurry photos. However, that is just not always the case, obviously. This is a common piece of advice, and while it's true that extending the center column can introduce instability, it's not a hard and fast rule. The key here is understanding the risk and compensating for it. If you need that extra height, you absolutely can extend the center column. However, you must then take extra precautions. This includes using a sturdy tripod in the first place, hanging weight from the center column hook, maybe, using a remote shutter or timer, and being mindful of wind and the surface the tripod is standing on. You may have no wind, but if your tripod is standing on a pier getting hit by waves, then you may get a bit of shake. But often those few centimeters can actually make quite a significant difference to your composition. Just be smart about it and prioritize stability. So on to myth number 3. And if you followed my channel for a while, you will probably not believe this, but once when I made a presentation, I had to defend photographing landscape photos in vertical format. Because for some reason people think that vertical format is for portraits only, and horizontal format, which is also known as landscape format, is for landscape photographs only. So in general, that there's only one correct way to compose a photo is just a myth. I was about to say it's bollocks, but yeah, it's a myth. Let's stick to that. While guidelines like the rule of thirds and leading lines are helpful starting points, creativity and breaking the mold are essential for developing your own unique style. As you know, I prefer to think of these as compositional tools rather than rules. You can strategically apply different tools to help tell the story of your image, evoke specific emotions, and guide the viewer's eye through the frame. Don't be afraid to experiment with different perspectives, angles, and compositions. The right way is the way that you best convey whatever you want to tell with your photo, whatever you want to show with your photo. And what format or orientation you choose to compose your photos in also utterly depends on what you want to show. And of course, even though Instagram is not the end of be all of photography, there's just no doubt that generally vertical oriented photos just perform better. And for some photographers, especially those who run a business, that is important. And even not even considering Instagram, I actually like the vertical format because it helps me concentrate the viewer's eye around what's right in front of me, what's in the middle ground, and what's in the background, rather than all sorts of broad things out at the sides. And you can of course learn much more about how I think composition, how I think light via my ebooks that are easy to read. They have plenty examples, and you can get them down in the description of the video. Myth number 4, and this one also always surprised me, because if you follow my channel, you definitely know that I do like to use telephoto lenses for landscape photography. And no, a wide-angle lens is not a landscape photography lens. So that you cannot use telephoto lenses for landscape photography is definitely a myth. It simply just couldn't be further from the truth. While wide-angle lenses are often the go-to for expansive vistas, telephoto lenses offer a unique and powerful perspective for capturing landscapes. Telephotos excel at isolating distant subjects, compressing perspective to make elements appear closer together, think mountain ranges or hilly landscapes, and drawing attention to specific details with a larger scene. They're fantastic for capturing layers, textures, and intimate landscapes that wide-angle lenses simply just can't. So obviously, as a landscape photographer, don't limit yourself, explore the possibilities of the longer lenses. So myth number 5, and that is that you always have to shoot at ISO 100 or your camera's base ISO for the cleanest possible photos. Yes, while that is generally true to get the cleanest possible photos, it's not always optimal, and you're not always in a situation where you can get that. And by not compromising on your ISO, you may actually end up with blurry photos instead. And I think most professional landscape photographers out there would prefer grainy photos or noisy photos to blurry photos. Sometimes to achieve the desired close down aperture, or in most cases a fast enough shutter speed, you will need to put up that ISO. Modern cameras can easily photograph great photos at ISO 200, 400, 800, even 1600 in most circumstances from newer semi-pro or pro cameras. And not to mention, noise reduction software has become extremely good over the past few years. So definitely don't overthink ISO. It's generally always best practice to keep your ISO as low as possible to get the clean photo, but do not be afraid to compromise your ISO if you know that you need that faster shutter speed or that close down aperture. And myth number 6, and this is a classic debate, heavy post-processing is cheating. The amount of comments I get with that, even though I've explained it several times in my videos. Now there is a difference between enhancing your images and drastically altering reality. Post-processing is an integral part of the digital photography workflow and has been integral in the analog photography workflow too. Some of the most iconic photos of all time have been heavily post-processed. I explain this more in the video up in the corner of this video. You can actually think of digital post-processing as developing film in the analog days. Adjusting exposure, contrast, colors, and sharpness can help bring out the full potential of your raw files and match your vision. The key for me and how I have developed my style over the years is to aim for a natural and believable result that enhances the beauty of the scene that I think looks good, not to create something entirely artificial. I will still need to be on location and take the photo, and no, I do not add unicorns and rainbows and elves or whatever to my landscape photos. I'm personally just very graphical in the way I approach my art, and my background is in fantasy. I've played hours upon hours, days, years of World of Warcraft, of Diablo. I've read fantasy novels like obviously Harry Potter, The Lord of the Rings, and Dragonlance. I have just engaged myself totally in that pop culture. I'm a nerd. It is only natural that when we engage with a photo, we do assume that there is some kind of realness to it, that there is some kind of authenticity to it. That's because most of us have mainly been exposed to the photojournalism genre of photography first, and then we picked up a camera and started pointing it towards what we personally found interesting. And yes, documenting reality is exactly what photography can, but that does not mean it has to. Although my photos aren't exactly one-to-one of what I saw with my eyes standing in front of the scene I'm photographing, which in itself is an extremely hard final photo to achieve, and if you want to do that, you cannot avoid post-processing. However, the authenticity in my photos is by letting me create what I want to create. I don't know why, but I've always found it hard to describe myself as an artist, but at the very least, every single photographer has creative license to do what they want. If I'm inspired by 80s fantasy concept art and that's the direction I want to take my photos in, then so be it. That only makes my photos more authentic, not less. As long as you, the viewer, can distinguish between photojournalism as a subgenre of photography with all its strict ethics and photography as a broad genre of storytelling. And honestly, I'm sure most of you can. I personally think that especially the post-processing part is where you as an artist gets to shine. But in the end, it's up to yourself what you want to do with your photos. Nobody else has a say in that. We still, for the most part, live in a free world. And if you want to learn how I edit my photos, be sure to enroll in my big post-processing course. Here you can take out everything that you want to add to your workflow and improve or get closer to whatever you would consider to be your style of landscape photography. I cover all the essential post-processing techniques along with a whole range of advanced techniques. On top of all this, you get 11 start to finish tutorials, and from time to time, I add something new to the course whenever it makes sense. Over the years, I've made upgrade videos with the newer features whenever Adobe Photoshop, Lightroom, Camera Raw makes updates. Be sure to use the coupon code to save a bit of money. The links are down in the description of the video. And finally, myth number 7, you need the latest and greatest and most expensive camera to take amazing landscape photos. No, just no. So right here, I have my Sony A7C. This is a measly 24 megapixels, but this has really helped me a lot in the field and taken some pretty great photos. Not to mention that my older cameras from back in the days, my Canon 5DS, which was a really great camera for its time, but the 5D Mark III and the 5D Mark II, looking back at them, these cameras would be so underwhelming today, but that does not take away from the photos that I took with them. The photos still work, the photos are still great, and the photos can still be printed as large as they could back then. So while high-end gear of course can offer some advantages, and some lenses specifically are really good and almost necessary for wildlife photography, for landscape photography it's the photographer's eye, it's the photographer's ability to tell stories, to compose the photos, to use the light to their benefit that makes the difference for landscape photography. For me, when it comes to acquiring new gear, the philosophy is to find that balance between image quality, can it improve my images in some way, shape or form, and practicality. That is why I keep talking so much about super zoom lenses, because in this modern day and age, they are more than sufficient for what you need to 99% of your landscape photography. At least as long as you can combine it with a great wide-angle zoom lens. So just because a lens is super expensive and sharp, like the new Sony 50 to 150 millimeter, awesome lens, but not for landscape photography. So it's all about getting the lens that gets the job done. But I cannot judge your photos based on the camera, based on the equipment that you took it with. The photos always have to stand on their own merit. So don't get caught up in gear acquisitioning syndrome. Focus on mastering the gear that you have, learn the fundamental photography principles, and practice constantly. Go out and actually take some photos. If you're interested in joining a workshop, you can find them all on my homepage. It's a fantastic way to learn photography, see some of the most epic spots on planet Earth, take out all the logistics of traveling, and meet other like-minded photographers who just want to take some epic photos. You can see them all on my homepage. Let me know which of these myths that surprised you the most. Are there any you completely disagree with? It's always interesting to hear. And I hope this video actually gave you some courage to go out and break the rules. If you want to learn much more, there are links down in the description of this video for all my educational material. And check out the video right here where I give you a new approach on how to compose your photos.